You plan to crush it financially in 2023? If that's the case, here's some tips to consider to financially better your position heading into the new year. Here's the quick list. Save more. Pay off debt. Increase income. Have a plan. Talk about it. Learn more. Take the match. Never mind the naysayers. Diversify. Protect your assets. Ensure your money is making money. And finally, just start. We'll go a bit more in depth on these topics on this episode of Through the Pines. All right, welcome to a financial planning podcast with the down-to-earth vibe. Sasquatch listens while building a snowman. This is Through the Pines. Let's bring in our financial professionals here. We have Rex front and center with planwithbaxter.com. Dan Nelson also with planwithbaxter.com. And then in studio in the Banyan trailer, Brandon also with planwithbaxter.com. So thank you, gentlemen. Brandon, are you stoked for the new year? And how are you going to up your financial game in 2023? What's Rex got you working on?
I don't know. Man, we should have like a financial goal setting, team setting.
Oh, I thought you already did that.
Well, we do like a business one, but like a personal one.
Yeah.
I've been more focused on getting a sailboat out on the water.
Sailboat. Rex, personal goals 2023.
You know, I increased my savings by 1% this year.
1%? That's hey.
Yeah, I increased it by that's what my plan is. So I've got that. I've already put that in place to make it as Brandon says, if you want it to happen, make it automatic. Right? And
yeah.
so I've done that. And then my wife and I have a goal of trying to pick up some land, some dirt sometime this next year. And so we're kind of focused on saving towards that to add to one of our three pillars. And so
we'll talk about the three pillars here. Dan, you're going to move a different direction. And the reason we're going to cover these first, it's nice to see how financial planners actually, except for Brandon, who's behind the ball here, because we got to, before we ask others to crush it, we got to crush it ourselves, right? So Dan, what are you doing next year?
I'm going to stop the accumulation part of my life and eventually do the distribution part of my life, where I actually start to take some of the money as income as opposed to accumulating it like I have for the last 66 years. So yeah, it's all good.
Well, that sounds more fun than this.
I got to redeem myself too. So I hate New Year's resolutions. I really do. But I go through my personal financial plan probably at least 4 times a year. And I even bring my wife and I'm like, look at this, look where we're at. And she doesn't care too much.
Yeah, it's her favorite time of year.
Yeah, it's just like, anyway. But yeah, no, absolutely have a financial plan. And like Greg said, I'm actually increasing my contributions 1% this year as well.
Okay. I like that it's a baby step. And that is the first on the list here, and that's save more. I've learned from listening to you that the basic amount of money you should save is 10%, and then try to bump it to 15 as soon as you can. If you're not saving at all, is starting at 1% good advice, Rex?
It's advice.
Okay.
I think that you need to start. If you're starting, then one, good job. But 2, we need to push yourself just a little bit out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, my advice is, if you're just starting, to make sure that you're getting the free company match in a 401k plan first. And so if they're matching, you know, essentially if you put in 6%, you're getting, you know, 3 or 4 or 5%, and put in that 6% and see how that feels first. And then if you absolutely can't get through and can't make that, then bump it down 1%, right down to 5 or something. But push yourself out of your comfort zone to begin with, just a hair.
Okay.
And if you're nervous about what that match is, the math is fairly simple on it. If you're thinking you want to start saving 3%, take your gross check and multiply it by 0.03. And that's going to give you roughly, and there's some nuances, but roughly what that savings amount is going to be. So if you take multiply it by 0.03, then you get a number and say, all right, can I deal with this much less per check? That gives you that at least gives you a starting point.
Okay. And the bottom would be like 3%, but really the bottom's like 10%, right? Like we want 10%.
Yeah.
You really want to be striving to save at least 10%, 15 if we can get you there, or as quickly as we can get you there. But really, we want you to be saving at least 10% of your income. Yeah.
But 0 to 10 can be really difficult to do unless you've got some bandwidth.
Yeah, well, that's true. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. Dan, do you have, or what are some of the hacks that you've given clients over time, especially those clients who have been putting away 10 or 15% for a long time, and then how do they bump up another 1 to 3% more than that?
That's not as big a problem to go from 15 to 20, believe it or not, as it is from 3 to 6 or 3 to 8. The most important thing is that you need to pay yourself. You need to pay yourself first. You pay the utility bills, you pay the rent, you pay your car payment, you pay everybody else, but you've got to plan to pay yourself as part of that process. And that's the only way that ultimately 40 years from now or 50 years from now, whenever you retire, that you're going to be comfortable in that retirement process, that you've saved that money all of your working career. That's important. So the most you can save, the better off you're going to be, for sure.
Rex, is my favorite question to you. Is it too late to start saving 10%? If you're
never too late.
Yeah. If you're ever in your 80s, no, I don't know. Like, when is it too late to start saving 10%?
No, I mean, it's never too late, right? But I will say the longer you wait, the more critical it is for you to get started. And it may, if you wait too long, then it may mean that we need to save more than 10%. We may need to save, 15 or 20 or some larger amount. Or I mean, life's all about kind of the give and take. And so it's about if I save less in the early years, then that means something else has to give. I either have to take more risk, I have to save more later, I have to work longer, I have to live on less. There's only so many variables that you can play with. And so, it's never too late. As a matter of fact, we have clients that are, believe it or not, that are 80, that are still depositing money into their investment accounts every single month.
I love it.
Right? Because between their pensions and their other sources of income, they're just in a saving habit and they're just continuing to not spend it. And so we're saving and investing it. So it's never too late.
But that's not necessarily always the best thing too, right? Like when we have those clients, we're having those conversations of, hey, you don't need to do this, right? You've got enough. In fact, you could start spending X amount of dollars per month and be fine the rest of your life. Because that's ultimately what financial planning is. We're not trying to just push people into saving. We're trying to help them understand, all right, how do we maximize the enjoyability of these dollars? And maybe we need to save a little bit extra in case of a long-term care expense, or maybe we've got more than enough to cover that care expense and all of retirement. And if you want to keep saving just because you're like, I don't see anything I want to do right now, then that's fine. But really, financial planning is helping people understand when they've saved enough and maybe they don't need to save anymore.
Dan, you mentioned this, part of the struggle to save is the bandwidth, and some of that bandwidth issue is debt. And before I personally had paid down some of my debt, Rex, this was part of my quandary was, okay, well, do I put my extra cash to pay down the debt, or do I put my extra cash towards 10% each month? And what's sort of the rules, Rex?
Well, there's the financial rule is, where am I getting the bigger bang for the buck, right? If I'm paying 3% on debt and I'm making 7% on my investments, then from a financial standpoint, the investments win, right? That being said, there's an enormous emotional lift to being debt free and to not having that hang over you. And so, you've got to weigh your emotions and how important that is to you, your priorities of being debt free versus financially, what may be financially in your best interest. Using leverage in and of itself, or debt, is not in and of itself a bad thing. It's how you use it and whether it's controlling you or whether you're controlling it is where the discernment comes between whether it's good or bad. So that's the financial piece. Personally, on the personal side, I don't like debt. And so one of my personal biases or goals is to be debt free, because I think it gives you enormous freedom of your cash flow down the road when unexpected events occur. And so, I make sure that our clients understand my personal bias, but we make sure that we talk about, good debt, bad debt, which ways to pay it off, and whether it makes financial sense to keep it. But from a financial standpoint, it's math. We just do the math.
Okay. Dan, you have a comment on debt and debt payoff?
Yeah. Everybody is a little bit different how they view this. And some people, when they get my age, they say to themselves, you know what, I don't feel comfortable retiring if I owe money to a mortgage company or on a car, or especially on a credit card, and I'm that way. I do not feel comfortable. So the last 4 or 5 years, I've spent a great deal of time making sure everything was paid off. My apartment complexes, my home, my mortgage, cars, credit card, all that stuff is completely paid off. I feel more comfortable that way. I have clients, and I know there's clients that go into retirement by having a mortgage on their home because they're paying 2 or 3% on the mortgage, and they're earning 6 to 7 to 8% on their investments. So that does make some sense if you can be comfortable with that as far as your lifestyle and how you live your life. So everyone is a little bit different. The main thing is, don't have credit card debt. Absolutely don't have credit card debt. You should be doing everything you can to not have credit card debt. Pay it off every month. Have a credit card, but pay it off every month. And then as you can, you've got to switch that so that you are paying yourself to save up to 10% or 15% every month.
All right, Brandon, you're in that age category that we just talked about this on the last podcast, where you had a stat, or it's hard to get into a house in your 20s, and that's a large debt item. But also, you got to buy cars, you got to buy furniture, and this is why Dan says don't put it on a credit card. And a lot of people will open the credit card at the furniture place to fill the house up with goods because they just bought a house. So there's a lot of stuff accumulation in your 20s and 30s. And so how have you been able to manage that yourself? And do you have tips on how to stay debt free as long as possible, so that you can save more?
Yeah, I think setting parameters is one of the best things you can do. Anybody can come up for rationalization to do just about anything. And that's one of it's fascinating to watch people, right? The fridge breaks. What do? Right.
Buy a new fridge.
Right. You go out, you buy it. And that's, in fact, I had my fridge broke, a few months ago. And so, a few things went through my head, do we go out and buy a new fridge? Our fridge isn't overly new, right? Maybe we just go buy one. Or do I go look used, right? Try and find one used. Obviously you're kind of in a crunch. So that's rushed and not ideal. But ultimately I ended up just looking at it, right? I found a little part. It was a little fan that went out on it, replaced it for like $30 or something, and next day our fridge was working. And so I think, I don't know what the answer to that is, because this is not my advice to go out and become a mechanic or whatever. But if you can put yourself in a mindset where you refuse to rationalize as much as possible, oftentimes there's another way out. There's another way to figure out a solution that can keep you from going into debt or keep you from, putting yourself in a hard place.
Yeah, I know Rex loves debt. So, you put yourself through school too. So I don't know if you had some advice, the advice that you tell your kids to try and stay out of debt, or advice that you have for those people out there who have accumulated a lot of debt. There's the famous Dave Ramsey method to get rid of it. But if you've got any tips to help get the debt down so that we can start saving more.
Yeah, I think there's two primary methods to get yourself out of debt. The one way is commonly referred to as kind of the debt snowball, which means that essentially you focus on your smallest debt first. And so let's say you've got a $100 debt and you're paying, $20 a month on it, and then you've got a $500 debt and you're paying $20 a month on it. Well, you pay off the 100 and then you roll that payment. So now you're making essentially double payments on the 500. And then when it gets paid off, you roll both of those into the next one, and you kind of roll your way on down. And the nice thing about that method is that you get a lot of small wins along the way. And so it's emotionally kind of sustaining because you can see and feel the progress fairly quickly and fairly early in the process. And that's why that process works fairly well. Financially, it's probably smarter to attack your highest interest loans first and get those paid off first, because that's what's costing you the most in interest. And so from a financial standpoint, if you're financially strong enough and disciplined enough and you don't need those little wins along the way, then we attack the highest interest rate first. And then as soon as it gets paid off, then we still continue that snowball effect to where we take that payment and roll it on to the next highest interest rate next. But I think the key is tracking. One thing that Dan told me, a long time ago, is that, if you don't track it, it doesn't happen. And I think that applies to a lot of things, both in business and in life. And so if you track it and you're actually paying attention to it, whether it's in a notebook, whether it's on an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is, and you're tracking it month in, month out, then it's always top of mind and you're focused on the progress. And it's easy to look back and say, wow, 6 months ago, I was clear up here in debt, and now I've actually taken a notch out, and you're doing it. And if you happen to miss a payment or you don't make as much, that shows up too. And so then you can say, wow, I slipped, and let's get back on track again and continue on with that path. But those are the two most common ways to get out of debt.
Okay.
Or sell stuff.
Or sell,
right,
well,
Brandon?
that's one way to do it. I mean, that's the next thing, is to just make more money, right? Increase your income. And so whether, and I have I jotted down some ideas. You can side hustle, learn a skill that someone will pay for, ask for a raise, apply for a new job. But, what are some other ways, maybe, Rex, that you have to increase your income so that you can either pay off debt or save more money?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you can do. It's just a matter of, are you willing to pay the price, right? Do you want to go, and in today's world, you can Uber, you can DoorDash, you can Instacart, you can, instead of paying for those things, you can be the delivery guy and make money that way. You can also get rid of things that you don't need, right? If all of a sudden you find yourself that you racked up a bunch of debt because you bought a bunch of TVs, sell a couple of the TVs, right? And even though you may not make the same amount as what you paid for them, meaning that you lost money, and so now all of a sudden you're having to pay the price for that, but at least you got some money to pay down part of that debt, and it reduces the overall debt load, and so it gets you there faster. And so I think that those are all things that you can do.
Okay. Brandon, you're the demographic that maybe is part of that gig economy coming up a bit more. What have you seen people maybe your age, ways that they've just made more? I've seen people personally change jobs a lot faster than in the past. They will use that experience for a year or two at one job, move to another job, and then move, where in the past people would stay at a job their whole life, or maybe 3 different jobs, but now they're moving every couple of years to make more money. Is there any hacks that you've seen for people in their maybe 20s and 30s to make more money?
Yeah, I think the possibilities are endless, like Rex was saying. I do think, though, the more time you can spend just thinking about it, just back up and just think, what do I need? How much more income do I need?
Mm-hmm.
What is the real problem? Is it that I just spend everything that's in my bank, or is it that I truly have an income issue? And figure out what that is, and then think about what you can do, because there's a lot of ways to make money. And is this going to be a long-term thing, right? That you need to raise your income for the rest of your life, or is it a short-term, issue where you've got a little bit of a crunch due to some sort of bill that came through or whatnot? And so I really do think that sitting and just kind of pondering on that, thinking about it, asking friends, asking professionals, right, and saying, hey, where do you think I'm at? What could I do? Because there's a lot of ways to make money. And then go back and revise it, look at it, look and see, how much time am I putting into this side hustle, if that's what it is, right? And how much did I really make? Am I gaining traction, or should I pursue, something else? But I do think that being conscious about those choices can make such a big difference.
And if you're older, so Dan, moving closer to retirement, if you're in your 50s or 60s and you've got a chunk of change in the bank, but you want to increase maybe your standard of living in retirement, what are some hacks for that?
Well, I think it's a matter of making sure you know your income and know your output. I mean, what are your bills? Make sure you know on a month by month basis that this is what I spend. This is what I'm spending my money on, and this is how much I have coming in. And the differential or the difference is, okay, how much should I be saving of that, and how much can I go live my life and plan a vacation or a couple of vacations and travel a little bit, or spend the money on your kids or grandkids, or spend it on a charity that you care about. So those are all good, fun decisions to be able to make, as long as your income is more than your output or the money that you spend on a month by month basis.
Yeah. Rex, really the biggest, maybe you should have led with this. I don't know, but you got to have a plan. And the best way to stick with the plan is to have someone like yourself, Plan with Baxter. Funny, it's Plan with Baxter, but it's just like having someone at the gym, have a coach, just keep you to stay in shape, but a financial coach, which are sometimes are what you people are called, it's like you're a coach, but you're a planner more than anything. And it's like, let's take a look at the scenario and keep you honest and move forward like that. So what's the importance of having a plan, Rex?
Well, I think having an accountability partner is important. And I think that, these aren't our goals, right? These are your goals. This is what you want to achieve. You tell us what you're trying to do, and then we help you map out a way to achieve that. And as we're mapping that out, right, we're kind of testing limits and testing parameters that you're comfortable with or uncomfortable with. And then as we map that out, we're just tracking it over time and keeping it top of mind for you. And are we making progress? And just like with anything, whether it be a diet plan, whether it be a fitness plan, whether, any of those things, you're going to have setbacks. And our famous, our most common saying is life happens. And life does happen unexpectedly. You can't predict it. Something's going to happen. Your fridge is going to go out. And is it a $30 part, or do you replace a $1,000 fridge?
Yeah.
And you're going to have to face those questions. I had a client call me yesterday, and her central air unit went out. And she said, my gosh, I just bought the house. I don't want to have to buy a new central air unit. And so we talked through it, and chances are, she's going to end up repairing it instead of replacing it, because it's not very old. And if she replaces it, then she's having to pay the full freight. And if she repairs it, she probably will get another 2, 3, 4 years out of it. And that makes economic sense. And so, like Brandon said, taking a step back, thinking through it, talking to people that you trust, and people that are making good decisions, right? So don't just go and ask the opinions of anybody. Ask the opinions of successful people, right? Ask the opinions of people that are crushing it, and see what they would do, and try and follow those attributes, not necessarily the person that's struggling next to you, because they may not be making the best decisions all the time. And what they do may be what you don't want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So have a plan. Consider using a financial planner. It is free to contact Rex. So, and his team at planwithbaxter.com, if that's a direction you want to go. That will not cost you a dime to just reach out to them and sort of start putting a plan together. Next one is to talk about money. I think this is important. I don't think enough, when you put a plan together and you keep it to yourself and no one knows about it, it's a little tougher. But when you talk about it with your spouse, your significant other, your financial planner, it might be easier to stick to. What do you think, Rex?
Oh, I've got a story.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
So, one time Sasquatch comes in and is sitting down and talking to us at the table and saying, okay, I'm ready to go through my financial plan and I'm ready to put this together. But I only want you to look at my numbers, because I manage things separate from my wife, from Mrs. Squatch. And so I just kind of raised an eye, and I'm like, well, how does that work? What bills do you cover and what bills does she cover? Well, I cover this and that and the other, and she covers, the odds and ends. And so what happens if this goes out? and she doesn't have the money to replace it. Then what? Well, then I take care of it. Oh, so they are a little bit more intertwined. Well, yeah, they're a little bit intertwined. And, and you go through that, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work to plan completely separately because, you are married, and therefore there are going to be a lot of common things that if one can't do it, the other one is going to need to do it. And so we need to look at that together, which means the two of you need to communicate. And if there's, the lack of communications about planning and financial matters, then there might be other, the issues may run deeper, which means that you need to talk frequently about things. Yeah. But I think not only between husband and wife, I think also bringing kids in. I think too often people are too shy to talk about money with their kids, or what they're making, or what financial moves what financial goals they have with their kids as they're growing up, and showing them and saying, yes, this is what I'm doing. And, oh, look, here's a mistake I made. That's okay. Kids can learn from your mistakes too. And so don't be shy to show them, the good, the bad, and the ugly of where you're at and what you're doing to change it.
Yeah. You have a comment, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that's also where financial planner comes in a lot, right? Because I love financial planning. I love my personal plan. And like I said earlier, I love to try and show my wife, but she's not interested, and the other night we were sitting talking, and I was trying to tell her all right, if something were to happen to me, this is where money would come from. This is how it all works together. Here's how the cash flows work out. And, she's not really overly interested. She was nice to kind of listen. But man, at the end of the day, I was so happy. I could say, just talk to Rex, just do what Rex says.
Yeah.
Right. And you can have your dreams, buy the RV, whatever, whatever that takes you. But work with Rex, and he can make sure your cash flows are taken care of, so that we set yourself up, you and the kids, for the rest of your life to be financially okay. And that felt really, really good to have someone that I can say, just go. And I know that our clients do that with us as well, where they, one spouse isn't overly interested, or maybe neither of them are interested. And to have someone or a team to go to in that incredibly difficult time and say, all right, I still don't want to know all the ins and outs of the plan. I want to know that I'm taken care of, and I need to know what I can and what I can't do.
Just so you know, Brandon, my wife never listens to my podcasts, so I feel you. In fact, she's famous for calling in the middle of every single one of my recordings, for years, and she knows the date and the time, and just, I forgot. Yeah, so there's zero interest sometimes.
You mean all of your podcasts except for the Through the Pines podcast?
Except for Through the Pines
listens
podcast.
To that one, I'm sure. Yeah.
Every single, she hasn't missed one yet, Rex. Yeah, but your significant other, weird, may not be into what you're into. However, sharing goals is very important, and especially when it comes to money and your money goals. So as long as they know what it is, or like you said, Brandon, you can say, hey, Rex is on top of it. So, which is nice to be able to do that. So put it out there and learn more about it. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're already learning more about financial information. But, Dan, where do you tell people, do you have a favorite book or something that you referred people to learn more about financial planning?
Years and years and years ago, this is an old book, but I used to refer to The Millionaire Next Door, this little book. And that's always been, I thought, one of my favorites, but that's a really old book. I'm sure there's some newer ones that Brandon or Rex might know about, but the key is that in most marriages, there is one or the other, and it's different every time. It could be the spouse or the female versus the male that has an interest in the money part, and the other one has no interest in most of the cases that I have seen. And I've had actual clients come to me that are in their 70s and 80s and tell me that, you know what, I've got a heart issue, and I just got told I had 4 months to live. And I told my wife that she needs to call the doctor or the mortician, and then you'll take care of things. And that's gratifying for me, sad, but gratifying that there's that kind of relationship. You should have that kind of a relationship with the people that are helping you with your money. That's very important.
Dan, I wrote down Millionaire Next Door. I don't think it's that old of a book. Millionaire Mind, Think and Grow Rich, which is even older, but still a classic.
Richest Man in Babylon. That's an old book.
That's an old one and still in good. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Psychology of Money. I think that one's newer. That's within the last few years. Automatic Millionaire. That's newer as well, I believe. And Clever Girl Finance is fairly new. But some of those older ones, I mean, well, that's what's interesting, because The Richest Man in Babylon, Think and Grow Rich, that's where you read enough of those and you're like, okay, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just a new way of telling the story over and over again. And that's basically the tips that we're covering today. It's the same tips. It's just the way they're delivering and packaging the tips out to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is crazy. Okay.
Because wealth is more of a mindset.
I think
say that again, Brandon, real quick.
I'm just saying wealth is more of a mindset.
Okay.
Truly,
Yeah.
you know, and things are going to change. The currencies are going to change. The investments are going to change. But you just have to have that mindset. And that's what allows successful people to continually, I mean, you see very successful people see major setbacks, but why do they come back from it? Because it's a mindset.
Rex?
Yeah, I think another book that you can add to your list, especially for kind of our younger listeners, those that may be in their, later teenage years, early 20s, that's a really easy, soft read, is The Wealthy Barber. It may be 15 years old, or it may be a little bit older than that, but it's just kind of the same concepts again, but just on a really general, soft, easy to read level, that just kind of takes you step by step through a story of a barber talking to a couple of kids about how to become wealthy.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Next tip is to take the match. Now, this was not necessarily in the Babylon story, because they didn't have 401ks back then. But Rex, why is it so important? And by the way, while we're talking, and it may have happened while we're talking, because this is December 22nd, and they may have passed an omnibus spending bill that has some implications into the 401 and 403k structures where you are sort of forced to participate. Or do you know anything about that? Did you see that, Rex?
Yeah, so it passed the Senate earlier today, as far as the new, what they're calling the Secure Act 2.0, and is in front of the House, and the House is hoping to get a vote in on it today so that people can go home for the holiday. And so we'll see what happens. It passed by a fairly big majority in the Senate. I don't remember the exact.
My wife was calling. I am not kidding you. She is calling, Bobby. So I hate to interrupt this podcast, but I got to pick up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, Rex. I just couldn't help it. At least bring it up. That I'm telling you, it's every time. So
tell Bobby she made the show. Tell Bobby she made the show. So
yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's great. So I think it passed, like, I don't remember, 69-30 or something like that. But it was fairly strong as far as being passed in the Senate, and the anticipation is that it'll pass fairly strongly in the House as well. It's not a forced savings plan, but it is opening up a lot of essentially a 401k plan to the masses, to where anybody can essentially participate in a 401k type of plan. In addition, there's additional tax credits and incentives for small business owners to set up a plan. They're creating a new startup 401k plan that's extremely low cost and low reporting, to make the ease of it extremely attractive to smaller businesses. And so there's a lot of it. We'll see if any tweaking gets through. I hate to go into too much detail on it, just because lots of times you get some last minute changes going back and forth. And so we'll see kind of what that turns out to be like. But chances are that will pass today. So.
Okay. So yeah, sounds good. We can address that in the new year, but it does, things change every year. But what programs like that do is match. So company matches, and this tip is to take the match. And so why should someone take the match?
Well, I mean, it's funny because we always call it free money, right? The company's essentially giving you free money on your money. If you put in, $10, then they may put in $5. And some companies, if it's what's called a safe harbor plan, that's immediately vested. And vested is just a a fancy word for ownership, right? Meaning that you own it if you're 100% vested. That if you leave the company, your money is always yours, but that vested amount goes with you too, to your new company or to an IRA or wherever you decide to keep that invested. And so, there's nowhere else. If your company has a match, there's nowhere else that's going to match your savings 50 cents on the dollar or dollar for dollar or $2 to your $1 in some situations. So you definitely want to take advantage of that because it can jumpstart your savings. It can get you to your goals that much faster because you're using somebody else's money to get you there.
Yeah.
But there is some cultural whiplash too. It's funny because people will be like, we've got some 401ks that don't have a match, and we're like, why would I do that? Why would I participate in this plan if I'm not getting a match? That's what. And the answer is a 401k is an incredibly beneficial vehicle, right? A Roth IRA that you go and start on your own. I love those. A lot of people love those. There's no match. Why do you do it? Because it's really beneficial. And both a 401k typically allows you to do Roth contributions or traditional. And so, getting your match is an incredibly powerful, escalator of savings, right? If you can double your money right out of the gate, it's hard to beat that. But then in addition to that, even if there's no match, it's still a very effective savings vehicle. And so I think, not overlooking those type of benefits is important.
Also, it's pretty automatic. I mean, it's in your paycheck that it just comes out and you don't, and Brandon, one of your hacks is make it automatic. It's that time. It's that time for small numbers. So what you got for us, Brandon?
Well, the ICI research group, they do stats on retirement plans, things like that. They said over 1/3 of the U.S. households have an IRA. Kind of interesting. Over 80% of households with IRAs also have employer-sponsored plans, meaning like 401k, simple IRA, something like that. And so, yeah, I don't know that there's any necessarily a takeaway from that, but it is interesting, right? That it's fairly common to have a retirement plan.
Rex, I'm assuming your plan is to make that number go up.
Yes, my plan to crush it in 2023 is to increase that number. It's my mission.
Yeah. I like it. And do that. In other words, I heard, I wasn't really paying too much attention, but I always got one ear to the markets that was not a good day today. And what happens is you have these people, if you pay attention at all to the financial markets, they might say, well, we're going to go into a recession, or I wouldn't invest now because, and there's always a reason not to invest. And so the next tip is never mind the naysayers. Rex, why should you ignore the naysayers and start saving and doing it diligently?
Because you can't control the naysayers. You can't control, there's always, like you said, there's always a reason not to invest, right? Now, interest rates are going to go up. Oh, interest rates are going to go down. Unemployment is high. Oh, unemployment is low. Housing prices are high. The stock market's too high. The stock market's too low. You're going to hear every reason, and they're all contradictory. And at the end of the day, you can't control a single one of them. What you can control is how much you save, and you can control how aggressive or how conservative you are with that money. And so you need to be doing those things that you can control, and which means starting, which means putting the money away that you need in order to reach your goals, and putting it in places that give you the highest probability of reaching your goals. And so if you can reach your goals with, money market and CD saving rates, with those kinds of rates of return, great, that's fine. If you can't and you need a higher rate of return in order to reach your goal, that's fine too. Then we do that. But I think being wise about how you're saving, where you're saving, the products that you're using, educating yourself on the products is critical. So,
and you can't time markets. It is mind-boggling how fast an economist can just be like, oh, we were wrong. On to the next, right? Like we thought we were going to see a raging market, and we were wrong. Or we thought for sure recession was coming, and we were wrong. And here we off to the races again. JP Morgan did a study. I think I shared this with you before. Took the 8 sentiment highs and the 8 sentiment lows of the last 50 years for investors, right? When people felt the best about the markets and when they felt the worst about the markets. Off of those 8 sentiment highs, the average rate of return the following 12 months was 4.1%. Off of the lows when everybody, like we're at today, right? When everyone's like, oh, now's not the right time to invest. And we hear that over and over and over again. Average rate of return over the following 12 months was 24.9%.
Oh, that's up there.
Huge difference. Yeah. And yet we see it. People are so excited and eager to invest at those sentiment peaks, right? You can tell when we are at a sentiment peak, people are ready to invest the money. At these low points, people aren't. And ironically, it's hard to time. And that's why we say just continually invest, because that long term makes the most sense.
Dan, you've been at this a long time. I want to know like the best excuse you've heard for someone saying, now is not the time, or maybe the most used excuse, from someone not entering the market.
Yeah. As I think about the timing in the market, you can't time the market. You have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. No one knows that. If someone tells you this is exactly what's going to happen in the next month, they're lying to you. Just run as fast as you can, because they don't know. They really don't know. But what I do know is if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, and even 50s, to invest on a monthly basis into a 401k, you want the market to be down because you're buying more shares at a lower price. You want the market to be down. And so now is a time when I guess we've seen kind of a bad year in 2022 as far as the markets are concerned. The numbers and the percentages and all the different indexes have come down. Now's a great time to invest, especially if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, because you will buy more shares, and then those shares go back up again and you're worth a lot more money.
Very good. Thanks, Dan. Next tip to crush it in 2023 is to make sure you are diversified. Rex, this is for you to answer because this is your 3 pillars of wealth.
You should diversify. I'm not sure what your question was there. I have 3 pillars of wealth.
Yep. Yeah. What are they? And I do like your line. And for someone just listening to this as their first podcast, where you can make the most amount of money and you can lose the most amount of money if you're not diversified. Yeah.
So that's concentration, right? Concentration is the number one way to get wealthy, is to be concentrated in an asset, an investment, real estate, in your business. It's also the number one destroyer of wealth. And people forget that, and they get so comfortable with their concentrated position, whether it be in properties, whether it be in stocks, whether it be in their business, that they get so comfortable that they forget that is the number one destroyer of wealth. And so it is important that if we're in the accumulation phase, it's okay to kind of focus on a few, smaller amount of things. And as we get closer to reaching our goals, we need to diversify it and make sure it's very diversified, because diversification protects wealth. That's what diversification does. And so the 3 ways that we want to make sure we're diversified, if at all possible, is the financial markets, real estate, and owning a business. Those are you look at any wealth in America, and that wealth originated in probably one of those 3 ways. People will say, well, I inherited it. Yes, you did. But that inheritance probably came from one of those 3 ways. And so you track it back. And the wealthiest people I know do all 3. But there's a lot of people that do, a lot of wealthy people that do 1 or 2. But the wealthiest I know absolutely do all 3. So
once you build that money up, you got to cover your assets. And so, Brandon, how do you make sure you're properly insured and you're not losing all this money?
Working with great professionals on all aspects, right? If I could have the most beautiful financial plan in the world, but then if I'm like skimping on my auto insurance and I hit someone and now all of a sudden they're coming after me for my personal assets, that could derail it. I could be perfectly on track for retirement with the best diversified, well-built portfolio. And then if I pass away or if I become disabled, and I'm unable to work, and then disabled doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like quadriplegic, right? It could mean I get cancer, I have a heart issue, or something comes up. I don't want that to derail me, right? We don't want to be insurance poor, right? We don't want to buy so much insurance that our premiums are massive, but it's also important to work with insurance individuals, because everyone has their own specialties, and make sure that we're covered adequately enough. And usually those coverages are relatively inexpensive. For example, we're licensed to do life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, and like term life insurance is so inexpensive. I've got $1 million of coverage I pay $36 a month for. I mean, it's so inexpensive, and that takes care of my family if something were to happen to me. And so, in all of the strategy and all the building and all the, entrepreneurship, whatever it is that you're going to build your wealth with, don't forget to look back and say, what if something else happens? Because there's a lot of things in life that can be recovered from, but there are certain things that are very difficult to recover from financially.
Dan, talk about protecting your assets as you move closer to retirement.
The key is, like Rex just said, and Brandon just said, diversification, making sure that you got all the bases covered. So you, as you diversify, as you have income sources coming from different directions, that's important. You might want to have a good income sources from dividend type paying stocks, maybe some municipal bonds that pay tax-free income, maybe some apartments or something in the real estate market that pays you a good monthly income through rents. And no matter what happens in the economy, one of those 3 or 4 things might do. And in a business, having a small business that pays you good income. But one of those 4 things might not do as well in any given year, but the other 3 might be doing really well in that particular year. So the key is to make sure you're diversified and that you have good sources of income that suit your lifestyle and help you stay productive.
All right, the next tip to crush it financially in 2023 is to make sure that, and it was feeding off tip number 1, which is to save. Now you got some money, but to make sure that money is making money. Rex, what's the best way to make sure your money's making money?
Well, it's not to stick it under your mattress. That doesn't help you make money.
Not right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, interest rates have been so low for quite a while now that, savings accounts, money market accounts, checking accounts really were not very productive from having your money work hard for you. And so people needed to find other ways, whether it was, the stock market, financial markets, longer term bonds, whether it was a business or whether it was real estate. And so, but getting that money put to work, but before you get it put to work, you need to make sure that you've got your bases covered, right? You have to have your emergency fund in place. You have to have your credit card debts and those things paid off. Sometimes that's the best use for your money, is to make sure that you're not paying out undue interest. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense, to have, $50,000 earning 1% when you're paying 19% on a credit card. That just doesn't make financial sense. And so, just being efficient with your dollars and making sure that they're working hard for you. If you're in, once you've checked those boxes, then it's a matter of starting to diversify and build out both your equity portfolios and if real estate's of interest, or if you run a small business, making sure that you're setting those up with cash flows in mind and profits in mind, and making sure that you've got a longer term perspective to make sure that your money is working for you. But I think tracking that and paying attention and having an advisor that you can go to help, show you if there are gaps, or to say, hey, great job, keep going. Both of those are very valuable pieces of information that can be used.
Dan, what have you seen over the years? Someone saves 50 to 100,000, and it's a great savings. They're, building that up over time, but they are paranoid to put it in the market. And so, how do you get them from point A to point B?
Well, you start out with a smaller percentage. Let's say, okay, well, let's put 20% in the market, or 30%, and then we'll leave some on the sideline, some in some cash, or nowadays we can get, for short-term money, we can get 4% or so, and that changes over time. But at this time, or this moment in time, we can do that with short-term money. But we can also get 3 to 4% in a really good dividend-paying stock, that may or probably will give us some growth over the next several years. Always has. So you just don't know, but it could. And so the key is to make sure that you have exposure in all those different areas, I believe. And as you get a little more comfortable seeing a monthly statement that might go up, may go down, whatever, every month, get a little more comfortable with that, increase the equity exposure, especially if you're young. If you're under 65 or under 70 years old, you're in your 50s or 40s, you need to have equity exposure, because that's where historically we've got the best returns, not in the bond market necessarily.
Very good. All right. The last tip to crush it financially in 2023 is you got to start. You have to start, and that is the hardest part. So Brandon, what is your tip to getting people to take that step and just putting some money away, or trying to pay off a debt, or earning more cash, taking a look at their insurance situation? What's the tip there to get people rolling?
I think a plan, whether that's a formal sit down with a financial advisor plan, or even just a sit down and sit at your kitchen table and write out what you want. I think being conscious of what's going to happen over the next 5 years, although it's not going to happen exactly as you plan it, having those goals in place, and then asking yourself, what do I need to do to get there? Because even I've met a lot of people with small businesses, and the small business isn't what they want it to be, and yet they're not taking steps to change it. And so sitting down and really getting a vision for what do I want out of my life in the next 5 years, and then trying to figure out back into that, what do I need to do to accomplish it? And if you can't answer those questions of what I need to do, then go start talking to people you trust. Talk to a financial advisor, talk to an accountant, talk to people who have seen other people make that successful transition. Put a plan in place, and then put the steps that are going to happen automatically, so it's in front of you, and that it just automatically is in your day-to-day process of what you're accomplishing.
Dan, do you have tips on to get people off the couch to start?
Yeah, I believe you totally. After this many years of seeing and doing this, you need to get some help. You need to come to a true financial planner and sit and talk about it, especially if it doesn't cost you any money to do that. Planwithbaxter.com, meet with Brandon or Rex or me, just to sit down and say, this is where I want to be 10, 15, 30 years from now, is really important, because we can help you get there financially. And so just start means sit down, make the phone call, and let us help. I think that's a great idea.
And we've mentioned that there's no cost to work with us, and I just love to be incredibly clear about it. If you have a question, give us a call. We will talk to you on the phone like normal people, see if we can answer it. We'll sit down. The initial consultation is always free. We'll sit down, figure out where you're at, maybe set some goals. Going forward, though, we do get paid, right? We get paid by helping you manage your assets. We get paid. Sometimes you want to engage in a formal financial planning relationship, and we'll set up, a monthly or a one-time cost for that. But yeah, we will sit down and we'll talk, and we'll try and help. We're not trying to withhold information to get you to sign up with us, but yeah, just to clarify that, I guess, a little bit.
Well, people will pay for a coach often in different areas of their life. And so this is one of those areas where, first consultation's free, but if you have to pay, it's probably going to do something good for you. But Rex, what's your tip to get people just started?
I think it's just like Dan said and Brandon said, is you just have to get 3 seconds of courage, right? And just pick up the phone, look on the internet, sit down, and just pick up that piece of paper, write down the goals, whatever it is. But it just takes that initial momentum to get you started. And it doesn't matter if you're 50, if you're 60, if you're 20, if you're 30, doesn't matter what your age is. Sorry, poor grammar there is. But just get started. Just figure out what it is that's important to you and what you're trying to do, and let's talk about it. And if you're struggling with figuring that out, with what's important to you and things like that, and that's where you're struggling starting, talk to us and we'll help you figure that out. We're pretty easygoing. We're pretty good at digging in and asking the right questions to help get you started on articulating what that is that you're trying to do.
Sounds good. Rex, I just want to say thanks to you and your team for joining us this year. I thought we had a great year of podcasts. I appreciate your time and your expertise on these podcasts each month. It means a lot to me. Again, it's planwithbaxter.com for to get in touch with Rex, Brandon, or Dan at any time. You can like our Facebook page. We have a Through the Pines Facebook page and Instagram Pines_podcast. And you can subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not watching this on YouTube. You can see our wonderful, beautiful faces Through the Pines podcast. So that is it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll leave you reminding you to use yesterday's dollars to finance tomorrow's dreams.